Tell me, Bill, a little bit about the beginnings, cradle to cradle. How did it dawn on you, and when? At what point?
Well, if the sun is shining on the earth and it's a dead rock in space with water, what happens? We get soil, we get humus, and that we come from the humus, and that's why they call us humans. And humility is to be grounded. So I decided if I go forward in life, I'm going into the arts because political science is so miserable. And I'm going to the arts because mathematical science is beyond my ability to comprehend. But I can work as an architect and design creative things, and I can design buildings like trees that have their roots in the ground and create biodiversity and celebrate photosynthesis and make more energy than they need to operate from photons and things like that. So that's where I got started. So I started designing buildings that are powered by the sun and the materials are safe and healthy. Then I met an ecotoxicologist, Michael Braungart. We started talking, and then we wrote Cradle to Cradle. The most important part to start with is that things are safe and healthy in ecosystems and in humans. So we start with the science of health. And ecosystems are like this. And every time you see an ecosystem in distress, suffering from ill health, whether it's a person or a wetland, the surest way to heal it is to connect it to more of itself. The healing is in the organism itself because it can multiply. And when you look at Francis Crick, who looked at what it meant to be a living thing after discovering DNA, for 9 years he thought about it and he said, in order to be alive, you have to have growth. In order to have growth, otherwise you're dying, you have to have income. And nature uses income from the sun, so on. And then you have to have an open metabolism of chemicals operating for the benefit of the organisms and their reproduction. So that's what it means to be a living thing. And so when we talk about things as cradle to grave, which is the current paradigm of industry, the linear economy, take, make, waste. So you take it from nature, you make something out of it, and then you throw it away. Well, away has gone away. Where's away? We now see the whole planet. There's no away here. We can see it all now. Or we would burn it. So it's really like a grave or a crematorium because we have a human projection on the objects. So we say they have end of life of a telephone. Really? It's not a living thing. So we say end of use. And if you say end of use, then you say, well, what's the next use? So now we design for end of use, we design for next use. This is cradle to cradle, from cradle to cradle, and you move to the next use. So across generations, we can reuse plastics, we can reuse glass, reuse metal, reuse things, and we can even reuse ecosystems if we're part of it. If we do sustainable forestry, for example, if we do sustainable behaviors. But I'd like to go beyond sustainability because I won the Presidential Award for Sustainable Development in the US at the White House. And the press came up and said, Mr. Sustainable, what does it all mean? And I said, I'm not interested in sustainability, really. And they said, how is that possible? You're at the White House. And I said, because if I asked you what your relation to your spouse is, and you said sustainable, I'd say, I'm sorry, that's not very interesting, really. What is this, maintenance? You know? So instead of just imagining ourselves with mops, trying to constantly maintain and clean up the mess, we should be thinking of paintbrushes. We should be creating things that are fresh and beautiful and do creative work. So I think we can go beyond sustainability if we actually become creative people.
To you, we are in the midst of, you would describe this a revolution and a substantial change of paradigm within capitalism. What are the leading voices and how are we breaking point?
I think what you're seeing with what Greta is doing is she's refusing, right? And refusing is the first step of things. And then if you look at the plastics or you look at the atmospheric changes with fugitive atmospheric carbon or fugitive durable carbon in the oceans and things like that, the first job is to refuse. So the idea of saying no more of this is the first job. Then we reduce, then we reuse, then we recover, then we recycle, If we get back things that aren't clean or healthy, then we upcycle, we purify them. Then we compost and get back the hydrogen, oxygen, carbon in pure form to help the soil. Then we regenerate from that. And then finally, we find ourselves with refuse, which is the thing with which we know not what to do. And that is waste of the worst kind, toxic materials, radioactive materials, things we don't know what to do with, probably should never have made in the first place. So the short version of that poem would be refuse, refuse, which is funny because it's spelled the same, pronounced differently. So it's eliminate the concept of waste, not minimize, avoid, reduce. Eliminate the entire concept of waste. That's the meta message here. And what she's saying is you're wasting the world and you're leaving us with this wasteland. You're turning the earth into a wasteland, and that is not a fair thing to give to a next generation, a wasteland.
Who has been receptive towards the notion of circular economy? And I talk about the private sector, but I'm trying that your message also permeates and goes all the way to the small businesses that truly, at least in Chile, also in Germany, 80-90% of the economy thrives because of these small business. And oftentimes this conversation might, they think, this is too grand of a thing for me. How do I incorporate it into my way of doing things?
So imagine if you're a local grocery store and you're not allowed to use plastic bags anymore, and you have to start thinking about it, right? What happens? It's not the end of the world. You know, when was the last time you saw a sea turtle being strangled by a paper bag, right? So it's not that complicated, really. We can start to think about it. How do we design things that can go back to soil or even back into the oceans in a way that isn't terrifying? So, okay, so there's opportunity everywhere. And even people who have a little grocery store, you know, if you did like the French do, just give somebody a string bag and say, here's your bag from our little store, come and use it all the time. You know, and you become a customer. You become a customer for life instead of this customer of death. You know, it's kind of interesting. So there are opportunities everywhere in this. And as far as the businesses go, it's fantastic for business. We've designed fabrics that are so safe you can eat them. We did the first one in 1994. It was my first product after doing buildings. And we did a fabric where the water was so clean you could drink it. It's clean as Swiss drinking water. How do we do that? We looked at 8,000 chemicals in the textile industry. We said there's 249 being used in this factory. We can get it down to 38, and they're all perfect. And the Swiss inspectors came to inspect the water, and you can drink the water. If you can drink the water, then you can use it again. If you use it again, there's none coming out. There's nothing coming out, there's nothing to regulate. Huh? You're in Switzerland in an unregulated product because it's so clean, it doesn't require regulation. That saves 20% for the people running the business because they don't have to run around with paperwork and put all this silly time into that kind of thing. And it's so safe, you could eat it, and it's very productive. It's wool and ramie, so it's ideal. It wicks moisture and insulates you. It's for seating like this. And so you know who uses it? Airbus, of course. It's the best seating fabric in the world. Very successful business, eco-intelligent. There you go. So you bake it into the business. You don't add it. Don't think of it as an added cost, because then you go, my business like this, and then you're adding costs. No, forget it. You're actually integrating it. And that's when it becomes really valuable, because you're solving all kinds of problems at the same time.
Does the financial, for instance, world value this?
Yeah.
Those that assign value to companies or to products that the companies make?
Yeah. It turns out that the companies that think this way and work this way are generally more principled and more caring about the qualifications of what they do. That's a good signal about the whole way the business is operating. That's one thing. So the investors like that kind of thing because they see good behavior. But every once in a while, you'll see some magical thing happen. When we did the River Rouge factory for Ford Motor Company, they had to purify the site because of Clean Water Act, and we did a big factory for them. And we said, well, what if we just take the whole roof and make it a green roof, the world's largest green roof, 10.5 million square feet. And so everybody said, you can't do that, it's impossible. He said, no, it's not impossible. We just have to find people who could do it. And we found it. We found the roof in East Germany. It had been developed by the Stasi to camouflage MiG fighter jets during the Cold War. So it was a very light green roof. that change colors with the seasons. It's camouflage. So we put it on a building, and now it's the largest green roof company in the world. But it saved all the water and protected the site and the building, so the building is much more efficient. But it removed the need for 3 chemical treatment plants and miles of pipes. And so it saved $35 million in capital expense on the first day. So when you think about that, if you're an auto company and you just save $35 million on a project, doing it this way instead of the other way by law, you have to do, that is the equivalent of a 4% margin on $900 million worth of cars. So you go to the board and the presentation wasn't, oh, it's going to cost this much, cost this much. It was like, you're about to spend $35 million, we're about to save. It was $48 million to do the typical engineering. You're going to do this for $13 million. So you're about to save $35 million on the first day because we're doing it eco way. See, it's built in. That's equal to the 4% margin on $900 million worth of cars.
And the financial world
Pays attention. You know, Ford was the one car company that didn't go bankrupt. Knock, knock. These are people thinking really, really seriously about what they do for qualification.
Are there industries where, for instance, mining, you cannot go circular?
Well, mining can absolutely go circular. Minerals are a technical nutrient in our industry, in our industrial world. So you can use the copper over and over again, and you're the copper country. So that could be, you could be the bank of copper, keep track of where it is, and then lease it to the wind companies and the automotive companies for their motors, and keep track of it, and let the pension funds own it, and they can pay you an interest to store it for them and identify where it goes and how to use it. All these kinds of things become very profitable.
Not sell it, lease it.
In a sense, lease it, yeah. You may, we call it the leasing concept, but the idea is you want the service of it. So we call it a product as a service. So what you want from the copper is to move electrons or move BTUs or whatever, energy or information. And so you really want it as a service. So copper can be seen as providing these services. So if you own the copper, you could lease it to people for various uses and keep track of it. So 20 years from now, you could go to the wind turbine company and say, your lease is up. You know, we have the copper, we know where it is. Would you like to extend the lease? Fine. Or do you want to give it back? In the meantime, the pension funds are secured by having copper up in the air doing something useful.
It's a wild concept.
It's simple. It's obvious. Yeah. It's like, do you want to make money and you want to save the world? What a good idea, you know. How about make money and destroy the world? That's your choice.
Now, something that would push the circular economy and much, much more forward, more steadily durable in terms of mainstream would be if the natural capital would not be as undervalued as it is today. It is severely undervalued. This makes this change of paradigm a much slower process, does it not?
It does. But I think that's why our language is so important to understand. Because we have sources and we call them resources. But they're not resources. Nature is not a resource. It's a relationship. Resource means resource. So if I go out and find something that we've used once and I use it again, circular economy, I'm using resources. So we have to change the way we think about what we now call natural capital, really, natural resources. This is not as intelligent as one might think. Because even if I look at economic resources, it's really economic relations. That's the most valuable part, is the customer calls you up and you have more business with them because they're a customer. See, they're not a consumer. This idea we call people consumers is silly. You can't consume a carpet, right? You're a customer of it. So what we can consume is toothpaste, food, things that go back to the natural world. But what we really are is customers, we're users of it. And yet we think of it as consumption. So how do we destroy the world? We think of things as resources, and then we think that we're consuming them. We're not consuming them, we're destroying the natural world by our use of them. See, it's very strange. So If you think about substituting the word relations, every time you hear the word resources, watch what happens. You think about an HR department in a business, right? We call it human resources. What? I don't want to be anybody's human resource. It's human relations. That's how do we relate to each other. And in a company, you're relating to all these people. They work together. That's what you're working with. They're not a resource to be abandoned if they're useless. You know? No, it's a relationship. Figure it out. Same with natural relations. If you talk to native peoples, they always talk about all our relations. These are natural relationships. This is where our life comes from. It's obvious that we rely on the natural world for our health and our benefit. It's obvious. And it's obvious that if you can use something over and over and over again, you get the value over and over and over again. So if you want to double the size of the economy, use it twice. Don't go blow up a mountain.